Hello, welcome to the Shetland Times podcast. I'm your host, Thor Hall. Today's guest is Megan Burns. Now, Megan is a marketing advisor, a coach, entrepreneur, speaker, and most importantly, chairperson of Unst Fest. Now, some of you maybe know Megan already, but she's originally from Unst. She was born in Shetland to a mixed parentage, let's say, a Glaswegian dad. He's been there 30 years, but he's obviously still a Southmouther, and an Unst mum. And Megan then moved down to Glasgow when she was 17 to go to university. What university did you go to, Megan?
It was the Glasgow Caledonian University. I did entertainment and event management there for 4 years.
Cool. You're sounding a little bit like a Glaswegian to me, but we can maybe get to that in a minute. So Megan,
I'll blame my dad.
Yeah, I think we should blame your dad. Yeah. So Megan supported some pretty leading industry brands such as Superdry and also local businesses such as Shetland Reel. And Megan's also a speaker at various events. So if you're looking for a speaker, give her a shout. Now, Megan, off air before we started, we were talking about where I was from. We were talking about Southmouthers and whether you're ever accepted in Shetland, even if you were born there, if your parents are from South, etc. And you told me that you'd been to my old hunting grounds on Papastour. Can you tell us about that? Because it was a fun wee story.
When I was younger, it must have been when I was still at Baltuston School, we took the Swan across, so we just took it across to Papastour one night and we explored the island for the evening and had a wee bit of a get together and then went back the next morning. It was really good. There was kids driving up and down the road, which was quite an experience because we were all thinking, who are these people? And they just kept going past us, probably wondering who we were. But yeah, it was good, a wee experience that I'll remember forever.
Yeah, so when we were kids, that is one thing I love about Shetland generally, but Papastour in particular, because the freedom level of a place like that is just incredible. We had our own motorbikes. We used to go to primary school on our own motorbike. So, yeah, it was pretty incredible.
That's the same as Unst, just being able to go out just without any worries for hours on end. I don't know how our mums and dads let us do it actually, but we were out for hours. Mm-hmm. And then we would come in for our tea and back out again. It was amazing.
So how do you find it? Did you find, or I shouldn't assume, did you find it to be a bit of a culture shock when you moved to Glasgow then when you were 17?
Actually not as much as people kind of think. I was lucky enough our parents took us around, like we've got our family here as well down in Glasgow. And so being able to come down every now and again kind of got us used to it and got us used to the environment and the hustle and the bustle. So actually it wasn't a culture shock. It was more excitement to come down and just experience something new, I guess, at that age.
Mm-hmm. So you went to university, Glasgow Caledonian, and what happened after you were at university then? Did you do the standard gap year that everyone seems to do these days, or what did you do next?
I started in university in Glasgow in 2010, and within those 4 years I went away to Canada to study at Brock University for a year, which was also amazing. Came back and I did my dissertation. When I was doing my dissertation, at the same time I thought it would be a great idea to get my personal training course as well. So I got that at the same time, and after university was finished, I kind of thought a lot of people back home, I've always kind of been into my fitness, and a lot of people back home were asking me for help and advice, and so I thought, why don't I just go back and do personal training in Shetland? There wasn't a personal trainer, as far as I was aware, that actually promoted themselves as purely just a personal trainer. So I kind of made a little summer business doing personal training up in Shetland, which was really successful, and I helped lots of people. And then after that I wanted to travel, and so that's how I got my money to go travelling. Is I went away to America for 3 months, travelled America for 3 months. I came back and I took on a role. I was living at home when I came back and did the local development officer role with Unst Partnership for a couple of months, and then I realised I miss Glasgow and I miss the city. I want to start my business, and so I just kind of said to my parents, I was like, I'm moving down to Glasgow and I'm going to start my business. And they said, great, you've got bills and you've got no job. And I was like, yeah, I know, but I'm just going to have to make it work. So I have, and so yeah, it's just kind of been various different places all the time for the past 7 years, but now I've finally managed to settle in Glasgow and work on what I've always wanted to do.
Superb. So we talked about the freedom in your upbringing in Shetland, and same goes for me. But so, for example, when you went and travelled and went to college in Canada and then travelled in America, What were your experiences like? Is there any story you could tell us, or how did you feel it kind of contrasted, or not? I don't know, in terms of that freedom that you felt you had when you were growing up.
Yeah, I think you're always going to have experiences. I think when you travel and going away to Canada, I do have family over in Canada, but the actual place in the university that I didn't know a single person. And I think being back home, you've got the freedom, but you've also got the comfort of knowing everybody around you. And so being able to go into a different environment where you literally don't notice anybody, and you've got to make new friends from scratch and learn about a new culture and a new environment, new rules, different way of education. They do things slightly differently over in Canada. And so, yeah, there was that learning experience as well. And I think even traveling America, not doing education, just traveling to be a traveler and see lots of different cities. We went from the west side all the way through the middle and then down to the bottom, New Orleans, and then up to New York. So we saw a lot of America. And just being in each city, every single city is different, and that opens your eyes a lot more to maybe what's outside of Shetland and different ways of life in all over the world. And it also related back the fact that Shetland is a very different and unique place to grow up. There's lots of things that you can do in Shetland that you can't do in all these amazing other places, and vice versa. So yeah, each have their learning curves and things like that. So it was great. It was great.
Like the difference between Scalawa and Lerwick, then. Is that what you mean?
I know, yeah, same thing.
Give me an example of a contrast in the States. So, I don't know, between New Orleans and New York, for example.
New Orleans was very, very culture-based. They've got lots of different things that they associate with just being down the south of America. So, for example, their foods are different. Their attitudes towards, I would say, like, alcohol is a little bit different. New York is very mainstream fashion, hustle, bustle, business, and New Orleans is kind of maybe a little bit backdated, but it's great that it is, because that's what makes it what it is. I mean, the place is beautiful, the architecture is completely different. So yeah, they are very different contrasting cities in one country, which was great to see, and that happened throughout the whole 3 months. Every single place we went had its ups and its downs.
How did you travel around?
Plane mostly. We drove in California, which was an experience. I mean, I've never driven on the other side of the road, and we just picked up a car as soon as we landed and drove up the California coast. And then from there it was buses and planes basically, but we booked all of our travel in advance, so it was a very scheduled travel 3 months. But that's because we wanted to hit so many different places, and there was stories along the way traveling too, but that just made it all a bit better.
Nothing you can share? Like, for example, I find as a Shetlander abroad, I need to give myself time to sober up after I get off the plane before I get in my hire car. Maybe that's just the way I like to travel.
When we were going from Las Vegas is where we landed, and we had to get a bus from Las Vegas down to San Diego, and San Diego is when we picked up the car. And it was a Greyhound bus, so like the main bus company in America that does all the routes. And the bus driver, we left this destination, and an hour later we returned at the destination. I was like, guys, we've been here before. This is where we're going. And they're thinking, no, it's not. The bus driver didn't have a clue where he was going, and me, the little Unst woman, had to tell him where to actually go and how to get to San Diego. And I'd never been there, so I was just on a map, kind of hoping and praying that I'd sent him on the right road. But yeah, I just don't understand how that situation even happened. But yeah, it happened.
And did you make it to wherever you were going?
Yeah, we did. We did. We were supposed to take like 4 stops off of the main highway, and he just didn't even bother stopping. So there's probably people in the bus that missed their stop, and people who were due to get picked up didn't get picked up. But we made it. I
think that's maybe why the Americans I know refer to travelling by bus as the loser cruiser, and I think it's because it's just they don't pay much attention to it. Public transport's not really a thing.
It's not.
When even your average punter can afford a Ford F-150 pickup truck with a Glock pistol in the centre console and tinnies in the back or whatever. Maybe that's Australia. Tins.
Yeah.
yeah, they don't seem too focused on public transport. It's not like the old
No,
Princess Rose run by Pat Eisbister running from Waz to Lerwick in the old days, where
I know.
it was the kind of focal point main mode of transport. I was consulting in Miami one time. I was just over for a couple of days, and I had a similar experience. The taxi driver, I said, "Do you know where this place is?" It was this big financial company called Assurant, and I asked the guy, "Do you know where you're going?" Because I'd Google mapped it and I knew every turn, because I know what cabbies can be like. Well, so that's Shetlanders abroad. You see, we're very careful. So this guy says, "Yeah, I know where I'm going," and I got the taxi through the hotel and everything. Anyway, 40 minutes into what should have been like a 25-minute journey, he says, "What address again?" He was from like Haiti or something, and I says, "What do you mean, what address again?" And he said, "What address?" So I tell him the address. We drive for another 10 or 15 minutes. And then he goes, "What address again?" I said, "Oh, hold on. You're having a laugh." I said, "Put your GPS on." His GPS was rolling around on the dashboard. I says, "Where's the cable?" Because he said, you set. And he handed it to me. So I put the address in and it just powered down. And I said, "Where's the cable? You know, the power cable." He didn't have a power cable. So this thing was completely useless. And then he started screaming at me, "You use your cell phone. Use your cell phone." And I says, "That'll cost me a fortune." Anyway, we're like an hour late by now. So I used my cell phone. It cost me 85 quid. And we got there way late. And I went to meet this VP of this company. And meanwhile, the guy's saying, $99, $99. And I says, $99? I'm not paying you, you fool. I says, "Where I come from, the cabbies know where they're going. I'm not paying you anything." And he had a taser. The only thing that worked in his cab was this taser and a holster, green light on. Anyway, end result was the VP of the finance company paid him $100, and off he went, happy as Larry. And meanwhile, I'm standing there like,
oh dear, that's not so good.
Anyway, Shetlanders abroad, we're very well prepared. So there you go. Shetlanders get around, don't they? So let's get back to on course here. So you're working in Glasgow, and as I was looking through your kind of your CV, your bio, I'm thinking this is a young lady. I don't mean to be patronising, but I'm 43 odd, and you seem to have worked with some pretty cool customers. So, for example, Superdry, how did you get involved with them? That's obviously a big global brand. What's the story there, Megan?
Superdry they were doing a brand activation event in Glasgow in the St Enoch shopping centre just at the bottom of Buchanan Street, and I would have been in second year university. So before university, I'd always kind of looked to get experience, so I was working with Unst, and I was doing different roles in first year, working at different events each weekend. And so I thought, well, what have I got to lose? So I reached out to them and said, "Look, you've got this event, I'm studying this is my experience, and I'd like to work with you." And I think my experience has a lot to do with it. I think that's why I managed to get involved, and I knew that having a brand behind me at such a young age would be an amazing thing. And I also got to work like in a main location in Glasgow, so that happened with Superdry, and I think all my clients have kind of just stemmed from them. And since I got them, I always aim to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and I don't set my goals low, I would say. What project or idea are you most fired up on at the moment then, Megan? So I think I've got three main things that I'm looking to do this year. One of them is through one of my clients' QD events in the SCCC. I'm going to be part of Resonate's marketing strategy. So it's a gaming festival. Now, I'm not into gaming, but that's my job, and I have to learn about all these different audiences, and I think that's one of the things I find most interesting about my job. And so I'm looking forward to learning about a different audience. They're going to need a massive digital campaign behind them, which I'll be implementing, so I'm really looking forward to that. I'm also working on my own event concept. I'm not going to give away lots of details because it's kind of a niche that I've found, but it's a global niche that Scotland's maybe not quite caught on to yet, and so I'm looking to put together an event proposal with them and hopefully get some partnerships going, big partnerships. I wouldn't say that it's a small event, it will be quite a big event. And then the last thing is I'm hoping to publish my book by the end of the year. That's just kind of an ongoing project that I do when I've got a spare time, write a couple of pages and go back to it. So 3 main things this year, along with everything else. I've already had a show. We had the Caravan show at the beginning of February. Got the wedding show coming up at the end of February with QD. So there's lots going on throughout the year. So different things.
What's the book, Megan? As you know, I run a writer podcast as well as doing this with the Shetland Times. What's the book?
The book's going to be aimed at, it's all about marketing, obviously, that's what I do. And it's going to be aimed at entrepreneurs and startups. So anybody that would like to start their business or who is just in the process of starting their business, it's going to be lots of advice and lots of step-by-steps as well. Just to kind of help out. I think that's maybe something I'm very into my business, and I think even when I go on holiday, I won't just pick up a fictional book. I'll pick up like an actual book that's going to help me, and it's always to do with business, whether it's an autobiography or it's an actual something that I can relate back. And I think marketing, there is lots out there, but there's a couple of things that I think some are missing, and so I'm hoping to include that in it as well. It's just an ongoing process, and sometimes it changes all the time, but getting there slowly but surely.
What would you say? I'm putting you on the spot here. You can have thinking time if you need it. What would you say is your favourite autobiography? You mentioned reading autobiographies. I'm assuming they're business autobiographies. So who would be one of your favourites? Doesn't have to be your favourite. Give me the top 3 if you like.
I liked Richard Branson's purely because of his story, not for business content or anything like that, but because of his story and where he went and all the different things that he had to do to get to where he was. I really like that one. It's maybe just a typical answer because he's such a big name, but yeah, I really enjoyed that one. I do like Duncan Bannatyne's as well. I've read a couple of his. He can be quite personal, and some of the things he says, like how much money, he speaks about how much money he had in his bank when he was like 30 years old and what he's got now, and it's quite open sometimes, more open than I would expect. So yeah, it's good. I like reading about all their stories.
Yeah, Duncan Bannatyne and I had a bit of a dust-up one time. So This was not a physical dust-up, this was on Twitter. So what happened was Duncan was away like up the Amazon or something on some kind of charity mission, and he was talking about how they were going to be bringing electricity to the... He didn't use the word natives, but it kind of came across a bit patronising to me. So I tweeted him and said, "Hey Duncan, electricity is overrated." It's just something like that. It was like a cheeky quip, and he instantly he was just like he was on Dragon's Den. I could hear his voice coming through the tweet. He got really angry straight away, and he responded with something like, basically, "What do you know? Get to France," kind of thing. And I said, "Well, I was brought up without electricity, and we had a well, and it was fine. Some of my happiest memories." And so then he tweeted back, just basically saying, "No, you didn't. Like, you're obviously lying." And I said, "Well, I did actually." So I name-checked, having come from Papa Stewart, and how for the first few years we had like a tin bath and no electricity and a well for water and all this. And so then he mellowed out a bit and started saying, "Well, what age are you? You must be like in your 70s." And I was like, "No, I'm whatever age I was, 40 or whatever at the time." So no, that was my little brush with Duncan Bannatyne. But no, I love the fact he wears his heart on his sleeve, doesn't he? And that's probably... I haven't read his autobiography, but I suspect he's the same there. He just fires up quick and just calls it like he sees it. I love that. On that note, actually, with the Superdry thing, you talk about just, like, basically just pitching them, like sending them something. And now you're writing a book and you're, what, 23, 24? So some people would say, "Why do you think you are?" Now, I personally respect that, but how would you answer that if someone said, "Why do you think you are, Megan?"
Oh, tough question. I don't know. I've always kind of been... I was brought up around sport. Like, my life when I was younger revolved around sport. And I think that gave me a wee bit of a competitive edge, and always kind of want to come out on top and win. And I think my parents have, of course, been a big influence, seeing what they've achieved in their life. And I just kind of think, what if they can do it, why can't I? And even I think about that on a national and an international scale. You've got all these big names out there, and it's like, if they can do it, why can't I? Like, they can make that much of a difference, why can't I? What's the difference? They're exactly the same as me. Do you know what I mean? And I do a lot of speaking events for students. I often go back. In fact, I've got one at the end of the month. I'm go back in, and I just talk about, a lot of the time I just talk about my journey, because that's what people seem to be most interested in. And I'll always say to them, people are so scared nowadays to just reach out and like put everything on the table and say, "This is what I do, and this is why I want to work with you." Not because I have to or because I feel like it would be great on my CV. I actually want to work with you. And so an email, I think, can go a long way. A letter, popping into an office, can go a milestone. One of the things, actually, Brand Events, who is probably one of my biggest clients that I've had working on Ignition, when I had the interview, it was me and 3 other people, and they told me afterwards, they said, there was 2 other people who were more experienced than you, but you actually wanted it. Do you know what I mean? You're young, you're a freelancer, and you want to learn, you want to grow, and you want to be involved in it. And I think that makes a big difference. So as long as you want it and you want to do it, then happy days. But don't force yourself to do something, I always say. So if I'm happy and I'm doing what I want, then that's the main thing.
Cool. So a couple of things you touched on there. Firstly, your folks. Remind us, what do your folks do? Because you talked about their achievements or the way they brought you up. But what do they do?
My mum is she's a business owner in Unst. She's got the final checkout and P&T coaches, the bus company, the taxis. She used to do the ambulance. She's also involved a lot in lots of different committees on Unst. Lots, like too many sometimes. Yeah. So she's got a big impact. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. She's always had that big impact. I've always said, like, one time I lost my mobile phone in Canada and phoned up my mum at 3 o'clock in the morning expecting her to be able to fix it, and she did. I mean, it's like, how is that even possible? But anyway, so that's what my mum does. So that, in terms of like business, that's always been an interest, like how that operates and kind of things like that. And then my dad is from Glasgow, and he always talks about, like, he moved to Shetland, he lived in a tent and he lived in a truck and all these things like that, and he lived on a meal, a chippy a day and things like that. And now he's a construction manager and he's headhunted and he works out in Kazakhstan. And so he's made it like in his industry, do you know what I mean? And that's obviously a big inspiration as well. And so yeah, just taking a leaf out of their book, I think, goes a long way. They might not know it now; they will, I'm sure, if they listen to this. But
brilliant,
it does.
It's nice. It's actually really refreshing to hear someone speak so positively about their parents. And I don't know, I've got this kind of theory about Shetland, is that it attracts people that are kind of hardworking, probably freedom-loving. Just it's kind of a breed apart, and the folk that can hack it there, especially that. I think those things come through. I love that your dad's from Glasgow and he was living on a chippy a day. I was thinking, isn't that what all Glaswegians do?
Black pudding. He always talks about his black pudding he would get, and he, like, even now when we go down to Lerwick, then he'll talk about different stories of his past, of when he was an apprentice and moving through the different stages of his life. Like, he's worked in Saudi Arabia and things like that, and it just seems to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So yeah, it's just really nice to hear. I love hearing all their stories of when they grew up.
Should record them. I've started trying to get Dad, getting him to record his story, so I'll like dial him up on Skype and then just record it with Ecamm software, and just so I've got a record of some of the stories. You'll be surprised what you find out if you just dig in. It's good.
I know. Every time I go home, I seem to like learn something new. I'm like, really? That actually happened?
It's maybe because you actually listen, Megan. A lot of people don't do much listening. But how can our listeners, the Shetland Times podcast listeners, connect with you, Megan, if they want to? What's the best kind of social media? What would you suggest?
Yeah, so my tag on social media is at Megan B Marketing. I'm most active on Instagram and on LinkedIn. I do have a wee Facebook page, which I will post sporadic updates on. But in terms of like actively online and engaged, is Instagram and on LinkedIn as well. I've also got a website, www.meganburns.co.uk. I've always got a free online guide which you can download, so that's just another way to try and help as many as I can, is just giving them a wee guide. At the moment it's the one on branding, how your brand is about more than just a logo. So if you go online, you can download that for free. All you need to do is enter your email address, and then that's it, straight to your inbox.
Brilliant. And Megan Burns is Meganburns, because I think there are different ways of spelling Megan, aren't there?
Yeah, there are.
Great. I'm used to spelling my name, as you might imagine. So before we go, Megan, there's a bit of a curveball, and Megan won't necessarily have had time to think about this, so go easy on her, Shetland. What's the best advice you would give people on living in Shetland if someone was considering visiting, or perhaps even going there to live? What's the advice you would give them?
The advice I would give them is to take it as it comes. It's a very different place, and it's amazing what you'll learn, and the people that you'll meet there, I think, are completely different, and approach to life is different and things like that. So yeah, just take it as it comes, because it's worth it in the end.
Brilliant. Thanks, Megan. Thanks for coming on the Shetland Times podcast.
Thanks for having me.